Tombstone, Arizona. In 1881, this mining boomtown was the home of Wyatt Earp and the site of the gunfight at the OK Corral. Less than 10 years later, it would become the location of one of the most bizarre UFO sightings in history.
According to a story in the Tombstone Epitaph in 1890, two ranchers were out in the desert of Arizona when they saw some sort of monstrous bird flying overhead with a huge wingspan. The body was described as being like an alligator, and the wings were described as membranous.
There's another version of the story told by the two old cowboys when they were very old that they never really, they just shot at the bird and it got away. It was literally bulletproof.
There were a number of reports of big birds that cowboys would shoot at or chase for great distances, and they reported the bullets would bounce off the leathery skin.
But was the story of this giant bird simply a hoax, as many believe? Or was there some degree of truth to it?
In the Old West, we have stories of the Tommyknockers, these creatures that resided in mines. The Ghost Rider, which was this cowboy that was flying across the sky, but also of ghost trains. So were all of those stories just campfire stories that were invented on the spot, or were they based in some type of truth?
For many Americans living in the early and mid-1800s, the vast western frontier offered both opportunity and profound sociological change. Freed of the constrictions of European tradition and Judeo-Christian fundamentalism, the early pioneers could now experiment with political, social, and religious philosophies, which their Eastern counterparts had frowned upon. One such newly emerging philosophy was called Transcendentalism.
Transcendentalism was perhaps the leading philosophy developed in America in the 19th century. One of the founding figures in it was Ralph Waldo Emerson. There was belief in extraterrestrial life that led him to depart from Christianity. And another author who was part of that is the poet Walt Whitman. His most famous book, 1855, is The Leaves of Grass. And in The Leaves of Grass, there are like 200 references to astronomy. He believed strongly in extraterrestrials.
In a nutshell, Transcendentalism reminded young America that all things are not knowable, and that some things are knowable but not through the five senses. So it opened up the Easterners as they went west to new ideas and new sights.
Another strong influence on the way 19th century Americans viewed the world was the emergence of a new genre of literature, science fiction.
I think the image that has come down to us from lots of movies and TV shows, the cowboy is kind of a rough, illiterate character. Most cowboys were extremely literate. Face it, there wasn't a lot of entertainment out on the plains.
One of the first great American science fiction writers was Civil War veteran Ambrose Bierce, who believed strongly in the possibility of life beyond our world.
Ambrose Bierce was an author of some very strange short stories. The difficulty of crossing a field was about an Alabama farmer who one day was taking a walk across the field when he just disappeared. He was gone. And years later, his wife would say that she could hear his voice from time to time, coming from this circle, but he wasn't there. Ambrose Bierce was trying to show us that this man traveled interdimensionally to another place. And while he was still there, he wasn't there.
It is thought by many scholars and historians that Bierce, as well as other authors of early fantasy fiction, had been influenced by Native Americans and their folklore. In addition to belief in star beings, They believed in the existence of interdimensional gateways, or portals, which would enable visitors to travel between time and space.
If you're thinking about like people suddenly disappearing through a hole in space-time into another dimension, at the surface of it, when we think about our modern theory of relativity and that you can bend space and time, it seems not so crazy, because we know mathematically how to describe holes in space-time that connect different regions of space to others.
Great Falls, Montana, October 19th, 1865. 6 months after the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. A fur trapper reports what might be the first documented UFO crash in the Old West.
In 1865, the Missouri Democrat reported that a trapper saw a light traveling through the sky at night, flew over his camp, broke apart, and crashed in the forest some miles away. The next day, he tracked it down, found a large stone embedded in the side of a mountain. It was hollow, it was cracked open. He claimed there were chambers inside of it, and there were hieroglyphic markings on it. And there was also some mysterious liquid spilled around the area. But the newspaper, went so far as to suggest that these were meteoric conveyances of aliens from Mercury or Uranus. So the whole idea of UFO crashes was explored in the 19th century, almost 100 years before Roswell.
But what makes this story even more intriguing to ancient astronaut theorists is the location of the sighting, along the upper Missouri River. This is the home of the Blackfoot Indians, a tribe whose ancient legends include strange tales of star beings visiting the region from other worlds.
The Blackfoot have very profound legends and myths relating to beings which quite clearly are said to have come down from some kind of sky world to Earth and in these sky vehicles. And the way that they are described, these can be modern ideas of flying saucers or UFOs.
Could the object that the Montana fur trapper claimed to have found really have been one of the alien crafts described in Blackfoot legends? And might the markings have been the same as what Joseph Smith found on the golden plates? To some Native Americans, like Chief Standing Elk of the Yankton Dakota tribe, star beings are still very much amongst us, and they are still making contact with humans.
A lot of our relatives that come from the stars, they speak on a telepathic level. And there were some that came to me and showed me a bar with symbols on there. They talked to me and I understood them very, very well. This is a replica of one of the bars that was in one of the light ships, and they represent universal laws. And they're guarded by the star people. So these are universal laws.
Western Nevada, 2013. On the west side of the dried-up Winnemucca Lake, researchers take samples from a layer of white carbonate covering petroglyphs carved into limestone boulders. Radiocarbon tests performed by the University of Colorado Boulder reveal that the petroglyphs were etched between 10,500 and 14,800 years ago, making them the oldest petroglyphs ever found in North America.
Winnemucca Lake in Nevada is the site of petroglyphs that date all the way back to 8000 BC. That is amazing because right here in America, we now have absolute proof of a civilization that predates the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia by over 3,000 years, minimum, and there's nothing else like it.
Looking at some of these petroglyphs, you've got to wonder if these aren't being drawn by early Americans. who are interacting with extraterrestrials and then drawing what they think they see.
When we look at the petroglyphs themselves, the actual designs, we also find very unusual formations, including spirals. This is something that we see very consistently in many ancient cultures, which is often associated with the shape of the galaxies. They may be aware that they were a part of a galaxy. Who gave them this information? How did they obtain this? Why would they make these illustrations?
This has given rise to the theory that could there have been civilizations not dissimilar to ours, but thousands of years ago, or tens of thousands of years ago, that have now become lost to the fog of time. This inevitably sort of raises the question, does the human race go in cycles? You know, we're a warlike species. Will we one day be somebody's memory and somebody's folklore, and they think they're the first?
Could these petroglyphs that predate even the earliest known Native American tribes be evidence of an ancient, lost civilization? And if so, might other, even more profound secrets lie hidden in North America, waiting to be discovered? The Grand Canyon, located in the American Southwest. This enormous gorge is 277 miles long and a mile deep. Much of it is remote and rarely traveled. In 1909, an explorer named G.E. Kincaid was boating through the canyon on the Colorado River when he noticed stains in the sediment on the east wall of a canyon gorge. According to his account, when he stopped to get a closer look, he found the entrance to what appeared to be a man-made cave.
Kincaid saw what he thought was an ancient gold mine. As he climbed up onto the walls of the canyon to investigate it, what he really discovered was not an ancient mine, but a labyrinth of rooms and tunnels cut into the side of the canyon that went back hundreds, even thousands of feet.
There were passageways radiating from this main chamber. He found stone tablets with Egyptian-style hieroglyphics. He also came to another chamber, and it contained a marble carved statue of Buddha sitting in a lotus posture, holding a lotus in each hand.
There was all kinds of statues made of bronze and mummies as well. He described them as Egyptian and Tibetan kind of things. So therefore, he believed he had discovered some vast secret city and treasure inside the Grand Canyon.
Anxious to spread the news of his extraordinary find, Kincaid reportedly made his way to Phoenix, where he told his story to a reporter for the local newspaper. He then contacted his employer, the Smithsonian Institution.
They sent an archaeologist named Jordan, and Jordan then examined the caves. The Smithsonian allegedly began excavating and removing the artifacts out of the secret caves, and supposedly they were all sent back to Washington, D.C.
But mysteriously, there was no follow-up to the story, and G.E. Kincaid was never heard from again.
The caves were apparently sealed up, metal doors and gates put over them. The National Park now denies any knowledge or existence of these caves or cave entrances. And if you talk to the Smithsonian today, they will deny any knowledge of the secret city in the Grand Canyon, or that an archaeologist named Jordan worked for the Smithsonian. And in fact, essentially, the knowledge of the secret city in the Grand Canyon has completely disappeared from history.
Serpent Mound in Adams County, Ohio, the Kivas at Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, Bighorn Medicine Wheel in Wyoming. Many Native American tribes say that at these ancient sites and countless others, entities that they call star beings came down from the sky to teach their ancestors.
To the Zuni people and other tribes, there's a spiritual connection with the star beings. They're the ones that actually rule the universe or the world that we're on. If you look at the petroglyphs, there's a lot of references to those type of entities.
According to tribes like the Zuni and Hopi, stories of these otherworldly visitations exist not only in the oral traditions passed down from their ancestors, but also in petroglyphs carved into rock all across America. On the Zuni Pueblo in New Mexico, there are literally thousands of ancient carvings that most outsiders have never laid eyes on. And the Zuni claim that some of these petroglyphs depict visitations from star beings.
There's definitely evidence that aliens visited North America in a distant past, and there are petroglyphs throughout this part of the country carved by ancient Americans that depict just that. What can you tell me about this petroglyph right here?
You know, if you can see on top of it where maybe a head would be, it's kind of eroded off. But on the next part of it, there's 4 compartments, look like extension of something sticking out.
Yeah, almost like legs.
It could be something that they saw in the air.
Isn't there a legend that beings visited on top of this mountain?
Oh, yes, on all of the mesas.
In conjunction with all the stories of star people descending from the sky in fiery shields and things like this, when I see a pattern like that, I always think, what if this is something that they saw and then they carved onto a rock?
And a lot of these are sacred drawings. They're just not graffiti like a lot of people say they are.
No, never.
There's no such thing as that in those days. Look at that triangle up there.
And you've got the dots around it that have been carved into the rock. They remind me like stars.
Could the ancient people in this part of America really have been trying to depict encounters with alien spacecraft?
There are legends and myths all around the world that can be interpreted as having been visits by extraterrestrials, and many think that such stories don't exist here in the United States. But the fact is that there are things in this country that nobody's even dreamed of.